Welcome to the Oregon Department of Agriculture Hemp Program's Laboratory Sampler Training. My name is Emily Roque and I am the Hemp Test Specialist at the ODA. Today I'm going to be going over the protocols and techniques that you'll use out in the field when sampling and testing for hemp. I'm also going to be going over our rules and regulations regarding hemp in Oregon as well as the hemp trends. Lastly, I hope to clear up any confusion some of you may have regarding common sampling errors or issues that arise in the field. So thanks for coming along, and let's get started. The definition of hemp that we use here at the ODA is cannabis with a total THC concentration at or below 0.3%. This changed from last year, and I'll be going over that in the next slide. Hemp and marijuana are different varieties of the same plant. Typically, marijuana usually has higher concentrations of THC and lower concentrations of CBD, and hemp usually has higher concentrations of CBD and lower concentrations of THC. Hemp is used to make a variety of products, from hemp concrete to clothing, fiber. One of the more popular hemp items is definitely medicinal, so any type of CBD tincture or topical, those are really popular as well. Let's go over a bit of the timeline of hemp legalization and regulation. In 2014, the Farm Bill allowed states to regulate hemp pilot programs strictly for research purposes. That led to ODA establishing a statewide hemp program in 2015, and in 2018, the Farm Bill removed hemp from the Controlled Substances Act and defined hemp as an agricultural product. This led to a lot of excitement about hemp, and it also led to a lot of interest as well. Also within the 2018 Farm Bill, the bill required hemp to be measured as a total THC concentration in pre-harvest testing rather than the Delta 9 THC concentration, which was what ODA had been using prior to 2020. So that means in 2020, all pre-harvest compliance tests are for total THC, not Delta 9 THC. Total THC accounts for the decarboxylation of THC acid, or THCA. As you can see on this map, hemp is very popular in Oregon. This map was actually from around June of 2019, and the green dots are greenhouses and the yellow stars are registered fields. So you can see some really big populations of hemp here closer to Washington and particularly down in Southern Oregon. This data is collected by GPS coordinates that we collect from growers during the registration process, so it's really important for the information that we collect to be accurate. As you can see in this table, the registrations that we had in 2015 totaled 13 growers, and in 2019 were closer to 2,000. So it's safe to say that the hemp industry in Oregon is definitely skyrocketing. I wanted to go over a few of our requirements for the hemp program in general. So our hemp program ensures that hemp growers, handlers, and agricultural seed producers are registered and that they do the appropriate testing. For growers, it's a pre-harvest test. For handlers, that is a post-harvest test. And in this video, we're not going to be covering post-harvest testing, but I do encourage anybody, if you have any questions about post-harvest testing, to definitely reach out to me. The hemp program regulates hemp using the Oregon Administrative Rule 603-048. I really want you guys, or everyone out there, to familiarize yourself with these rules. It provides so much context to the testing requirements that you use every day, and it'll really allow for a better understanding. Some of the rules that pertain to you in particular are, for example, in our registration section, we require growers up front to make sure that in their registration application, the areas that they're going to be growing on are contiguous. So that's important to know because our program personally vets every single application and we make sure that an area registered is contiguous. So if you get to a field and it's not, chances are it was not registered that way. And if that were the situation, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but I would always suggest reaching out to us. Also, it explains what being contiguous means, so it's just really important for you to read up on that. It talks about record keeping, so that is a requirement that all of our growers keep their testing documents, and then it also goes really, delves really deep into testing requirements and what the responsibilities are of the growers in regards to testing. So again, please familiarize yourself with these rules. Here's a flyer that I really like. It really just showcases all of the different programs at the ODA that play a part in hemp regulation. For example, food safety. If we had someone making an edible, they would need to get a food safety license. Pesticides department comes into play whenever there's a pesticide issue regarding hemp, weights and measures, inspecting scales. We have a water quality department that deals with hemp runoff and if there were any pollution. So it's a really, there's so many programs that play a part, and our program alone could not do this alone. So let's get into a little bit of the pre-harvest testing requirements. So all registered hemp production areas must be sampled and tested by a laboratory licensed by the OLCC and accredited by the OHA. And I'm hoping if you're watching this video that that's you. Growers request sampling using an ODA sample request form. They submit this form to the lab of their choosing. I want to make it clear that you should receive this form before you go out and do any testing. It's really important that you collect the necessary information prior to going out in the field and that everybody retains a copy of this document. Here's the form, and if you're not new here, you'll realize that this form looks a little bit different. I created these forms. I wanted them to be more clear and to really align more with our registration application so that growers have less errors when it comes to filling out this document. As you'll see, I've included the grower name and business name. Please only ensure that the grower lists one business name, as well as make sure that they list their contact information and then their registration number as well. Note that I put IHG here. That is so that I only get that registration number. I really don't want the handler number or the seed number. This is the only number that I'm really caring about. As you look in the hemp sampling area, it must be a registered production area. And I said, do not combine production areas. Please do not let a grower combine their production areas for testing. So this really aligns with our application very well. So we have a grow site name, a production area name, and a harvest lot name. The grow site, this whole section can kind of confuse people. So I hope to clarify it a little bit. The grow site name is what I like to refer to as like a farm name or a property name, something like that. The production area is really the area that you're producing hemp on. So this is the area that's going to have a test result associated with it. If the grower decides to break up that production area into different harvest lots for testing, that's when they would use this. So this doesn't necessarily need to be filled out. It's only if they're splitting it up. So if that were the case, they would still fill out this production area name, and then they would also list a production area name here, and then do -2020-00, and then 1, and so on and so forth. So each one of these harvest lots needs to have their own hemp sampling request form. If you read 603-048, this is really explained in there about how to designate a harvest lot, and it really needs to be specific. A lot of the test reports I see are just a lot of made-up names, which make it really hard for me to figure out which field that the test report is for. Also, something I've listed is the total size of the production area and then the size of the area to be sampled. This is important for me to realize or to understand if someone had all of their production area tested or a portion of it. As well, the area type intended use for hemp crop, and then the declared harvest date. So for area type, there should only be one area type listed. I've seen a lot, and we'll get into this a little later, but a field in a greenhouse should not be listed on one test report or one sampling request form because that, by definition, is not contiguous. An area is not going to have a field in a greenhouse, and it should not be tested as one area. So the declared harvest date, I said, must be no longer than 28 days from sample date. So this year in 2020, this is correct. It is not 15 days. I've heard that that is going around. It's definitely not 15 days. We're sticking with the 28-day window. So what that means is 28 days from the date that the sampler came out and took their sample, the grower needs to start their harvest of that area that they sampled. This written description really needs to be filled out. Please don't accept a form that has any blanks on it, especially this. And the visual depiction, I've stated here, please outline and label all surrounding harvest lots and production areas, including the ones left untested. This will help me with traceability, and it will help me determine which areas still I'm missing a test report for. Also, please make sure that it's signed and dated. So let's get into a little bit of the hemp sampling portion. To be sufficient to meet the requirement for pre-harvest THC sampling and testing, testing must be conducted as described in Exhibit A and B protocols. All of the forms that I'm mentioning are available on our website. Please take a really good look at Exhibit A and Exhibit B. These are in particular the protocols and techniques that you need to be using out in the field and in the lab. I really need you to familiarize yourself with these. I'm going to give you a little bit of a summary, but by no means is this everything listed on those documents. So an important point is that only a sample taken by and remaining in the chain of custody of an authorized lab qualifies for testing. That's pretty self-explanatory. It's just meaning when you take a sample, you're responsible for getting that into the right hands, and no one else who's not involved can be associated with it. Sampling must produce a representative sample of each harvest lot. So what that means to me is do not pick and choose what plants that you sample, especially don't let a grower tell you what plants to sample. Even if you're sampling enough plants, if you pick and choose, that might not be as representative as if you were to be totally random. Avoid contamination, so making sure that your tools and equipment are sanitized and that you're not reusing your paper bags is important. Only sampling flowers or only sampling plants with flowers if the purpose of the harvest lot is to produce flowers. So if you can see on the harvest lot sampling request form that I just showed, if they list flower as their intended use, there needs to be flowers present when you're sampling. If there are not, if you show up and there are not flowers present, you need to reschedule. Please don't try and use other parts of the plant to make up the sample or do anything else. You need to reschedule. Lastly, this is really important. This is a pre-harvest test, and so sampling of harvested hemp is absolutely not allowed. If you show up to an area and a grower just hands you chopped down flower or something that they want you to test, that's not a pre-harvest compliance test. And so any sampling you do for this test needs to come from plants that are in the ground and plants that you personally take the sample from. This is this is explained in more detail in Exhibit A. This is the sampling pattern that you're going to use. So it's a sawtooth pattern, and you must use one of these two sawtooth patterns. As you can see here, the sampler starts in the top left corner of the field or greenhouse, and they're taking samples along the way in a zigzag pattern. These are exhibiting kind of the maximum amount of samples you would take, so this is for a larger field or greenhouse, but I think it's a very good representation of the sampling pattern that we expect you to use. Here's a little bit more sampling protocols. I'm just going to run through these. If anyone has any questions or needs additional clarification, do not hesitate to contact me. I know this is really detailed and in-depth, so I welcome questions. So a sample shall be obtained from flowering tops when flowering tops are present and shall be approximately 8 inches in length. So a question I get is, does it really need to be from the top? Yes, it does. And it also needs to be approximately 8 inches. Avoid sampling dead, diseased, or mechanically injured plants. If you take a sample from a sick plant, it may not be representative of an otherwise healthy population of plants. So just note that a sample shall only consist of no more than one sample per plant randomly chosen from the harvest lot. So like I said, make sure it's totally random. Place each sample in a paper bag, and all of the samples from the harvest lot are collected into a single paper bag. And this is what we refer to as the composite sample. Each composite sample, so each bag, should consist of a maximum of 30 plant heads of about 8 inches. So really there's not going to be a case where you're sampling more than 30 plants, even with the largest fields. And so for small fields, or if you know the estimated amount of plants, please use this exhibit, the hypergeometric table. It's an exhibit A as well. So this explains how many plants you should sample for the size of the harvest lot. So for example, if someone had a really small field, like 10 plants, if you could see here 1 to 13, you would be sampling all of them. So you'd be sampling all 10 plants, and you would be collecting the flowering tops from all 10 plants. And as you can see down here, all the way up to 200,000 plants, you're going to be closer to that 30. So this is the table you should be following. In no case may the sample size be less than 4 ounces, which is a necessary amount for laboratory tests and file samples. This does actually come up when we're talking about like a retest, or if you need to have a secondary lab do a retest confirmation. That file sample is going to get really small. So always make sure that it's large enough to have the appropriate test done on it. So for sample collection, collect the information necessary to complete the on-site sampling form, which is the form that your sampler or you are going to be filling out while you are out in the field. Do not fill it out prior to going to the field or after, and also please don't copy it, as I was saying, from the grower. It's very easy to tell when a sampler just copies verbatim what the grower put, and that really does me no good because I cross-reference the documents and I want to know what the sampler's perspective was of the area. So please don't copy it. Do not sample non-contiguous areas. As I mentioned, if you get to a field and there's a creek running through the middle of it and you can't pass it, it's not contiguous. It's not considered contiguous, and so you can't sample it as one area, and the grower either should not have registered it that way or did not register it that way. So always get in contact with us if there's any question. And I don't want exceptions to be made for certain growers because they're more difficult or what have you. I always recommend, if there's a situation like that, to just call us on site and we'll deal with it. The area sample should be consistent with the area provided on the grower registration. So I understand that you all do not see a copy of the grower registration, but just to let you know, whatever areas that they have listed on that registration, and the registration application itself is very detailed, that information should directly match the areas that they're getting sampled. When it doesn't, I reach out to the grower and ask them to correct it. So if you've ever received an email from a grower, it's really to have the grower correct those forms, and so I can allow for better record keeping on my end. I've seen a lot of people just making up names, and like I said before, that totally does me no good, and it takes a lot of time for me to correct that. So another thing is production areas cannot be combined for sampling or testing. This is really important, and I wanted to just take a minute to go over something that I feel really needs to be stated. When you get to a field, or even if it's just over the phone, do not give a grower compliance advice. Do not tell the grower how to divide up their fields. Do not tell the grower any type of advice relating to compliance or compliance testing. This is not your job. So if you get to a field and a grower is asking you questions about compliance, please don't answer them. Please don't offer your advice in any way about that. This could really fall back on the laboratories, and I would hate for that to happen. So again, do not give advice relating to compliance. So I hope I made that clear enough. If you have any questions about that, let me know. Here is the on-site sampling form that you as a sampler are going to be filling out. It's changed. Again, I matched it a little bit like the sample request form. So up here, this is the information for the lab, the sampler, the registered grower name, business name. Remember to only put one business name, the number of harvest lots that are going to be sampled. Again, fill out a form for each harvest lot, the time sampling was started, and the representative that was present. This is the same as the form I just showed you. This was kind of what I was talking about not copying it. So understandably, certain things are just easy to transfer over, and that's fine, but particularly like the size of area that was sampled, I want to know your take on that. The total size of production area, I also want to know your take on that. You guys are out in the field more than I am, so I rely on that information. Area type, make sure it's only one. And the declared harvest date, also make sure that you put that as well. Please don't leave the written description blank. That's happened a lot. And then also, so this visual depiction, this is where you're going to draw a picture of the production area that you're sampling. Please include the sampling pattern. So that sawtooth pattern that I showed you, you need to include that pattern on the production area. So whatever way you sampled it in that sawtooth pattern, please put that in. Again, making sure the signatures are complete as well. Okay, let's go over some areas that are not considered contiguous. Greenhouses. So one greenhouse is one production area. Do not combine multiple greenhouses and test them as one production area. That's actually happened a lot. And don't combine a greenhouse and a field. Hoop houses. Hoop houses are an interesting topic. It's not, the way I look at it is if you have 10 hoop houses back to back, right, and the plastic is down on those hoop houses for 99% of the time, and the 1% of the time the grower rolls up the plastic for testing purposes, that's not going to be the same result as if the plastic was rolled up the whole entire season. So each hoop house is their own production area. If you get any pushback on that from the grower, please have them call me. Fields with roads or non-accessible fields via fences or any other obstruction. So we make an exception for like the standard driveway, but if there's any county road or the grower wants you to cross this highway to get to the other portion of their field, that's a separate field. I can almost guarantee you that we did not allow that to be tested as one on the registration. So please don't test it as one field. Fields with fences or any type of other obstructing feature. So we make an exception for fences with gates. So if you're going through a field and then there's a fence with a gate, you can go through the gate and continue sampling that field. However, if there's not a gate or if it's not easily accessible for you to get around the fence, it is 2 production areas. So I don't want you doing half of a zigzag, hopping a fence, and then doing another half of the zigzag, right? That's not okay. So if that's the case, the grower needs to separate that. Irrigation ditches are another thing. Waterways, anything that you can't easily cross, it's not contiguous. Like a tree line, for example, you shouldn't be sampling a hemp field and then have to walk through a forest and get to the other part of the hemp field. That's 2 hemp fields. So I hope that's clear. So after analyzing the sample that you brought back to the laboratory completes the ODA PreHarvest THC report. And all of the information on the THC report should match the sampling forms, which typically these don't have many errors on them, so thank you. It's pretty self-explanatory. So the primary laboratory testing, that would be you. Indicate if this is your first test, which it will be. Grower name, grower business name. Please include the grower registration number. This contact information is really important to me. Also this field name or harvest lot. So what you would put here is the production area name. Or if they broke it into a harvest lot, it would be that harvest lot name, right? So each harvest lot is going to have their own one of these forms. So if the production area was Emily's field and I broke it up into harvest lots, and let's say this test report was for my first harvest lot, I would say you would put Emily's field -2020-001 and then so forth. So, and then the analytical results, this is where you'd put your result. Keep in mind, again, that it is measured in total THC this year. So anything at or above 0.35, because we allow for rounding, total THC fails. And another note, if you are reporting an LOQ, please be sure to put the less than sign before the LOQ to indicate that it passes, okay? All right. So after all of this is completed, you've went out and sampled, you took the sample back to the lab, you're going to be submitting all 3 of these forms that I just talked about to the ODA by email. So the email you're going to send that to is hemptestreports@oda.state.or.us. So you're going to be sending the sample request form from the grower, the on-site sampling form that you filled out, as well as the Hemp PreHarvest THC Report. Please send these forms. The Hemp PreHarvest THC Report is different than a COA, and we view it differently in terms of compliance. Also, please keep records of these forms. It's really important in case I ever needed a record. Okay, so let's go over what happens when a grower fails a pre-harvest test. So if you get notice that a grower failed, you need to report that to the ODA and to the grower immediately. I work with the grower after receiving that failed harvest test, so a lot of times there's some communication back and forth, and they might be asking other things of you. So keep in mind, this is explained in OAR 603048. It explains in detail what the retesting process is like, what the resampling process is like. So please read up on that because it pertains to you. The grower's options for the failed harvest lot are to retest. They can have you retest the file sample that you have, or they can have a lab come out and resample and then test that, or they can destroy it. So whatever they choose, I'm working with them along through that process because there's steps that they need to follow. For example, the grower needs to request a retest within a certain time frame. I also need to be notified of that, or the ODA needs to be notified of the request for a retest, and then a secondary lab needs to confirm a passing result. So those are just a few of the requirements that the grower really needs to pay attention to, and they matter to you as well. This is how you'd fill out the forms if you're doing a retest. So this was the original test report. Big Leaf Lab tested it. It was the first test and it failed. The grower said, hey, can you retest that file sample? Big Leaf Lab, again, the same lab, does the second test. Please, please, please make sure you put second test. It gets really complicated when I'm dealing with a lot of different results, and if I get 2 of the same grower with different test reports, but it both says first test, it's hard for me to decipher which was the retest result and which was the original result. So please make sure you put second test if it's a second test. And similarly, if the grower passes that second test, a secondary lab needs to verify that. So you would be working or coordinating with the other lab that's going to be confirming that result and sending that file sample to that lab. And then that lab would put secondary lab testing and they would mark the third test. If the grower decided to resample and break that failed harvest lot into more harvest lots, so it goes from a production area that someone sampled as a production lot or a harvest lot, and then they would take that failed harvest lot and divide it again into more harvest lots. If that were the case, this is the naming that they should be using on their form. So it's the same as a harvest lot designation, just with letters at the end of it. So, and that's all I have for you. I understand that you may have more questions. I'm sorry we didn't get to do this in person, but if you do have any questions, please, please, please reach out to me. I really want to create a great relationship with all of our labs, and I really value what you do every day. You are ensuring the integrity and safety of Oregon hemp, and our whole program greatly appreciates you for it. I want to be there to support you and help you in any way that I can. So again, please contact us with anything. I'm here for you, and let's just have a great season.